Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you might be around this global village. We go live every Saturday at 11 Eastern Standard Time in over 140 different countries around the world. And this is an opportunity for us to talk about matters pertaining to Africa. And every now and again, we do have special guests, and we are not going to be disappointed today. I know for the last little while we've been having technical difficulties, but listen, today we are actually on time, and our guest is already logged in. And so we are really just excited about the opportunity that we have today. And of course, this is Love Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio, and this is today's Africa with your host, Dr. FM, Francis Munag Mpindu. And we are delighted coming all the way from the studios in Toronto, and we're grateful that we do have a team up there in Toronto, in Canada, that works hard to make sure that things are done right. So Brother Theo and the team, thank you. And we're really just delighted that we are here today. And today we are really excited about talking on this topic of Africans' contributions to the global well-being. It's quite a topic, and we do have a special guest who is going to help us unpack that and share from personal experiences, as well as some of the things that are happening in the global village. And like I said, we go live every Saturday at 11 Eastern Standard Time. We are on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, and of course, StreamYard, which is one of the most secure platforms that you can use for the kinds of things that we are doing. And please log in lovebay.com, subscribe, share the channel within your own networks. And so, again, we are delighted to be here today. Today, we do have a special guest, Dr. Isaac Mwase. Dr. Isaac Mwase is someone I have known for many years. Way back in high school, he went to a different high school, which actually had a very good reputation. It was known to have very intelligent young men and young women, and he was one of those. I remember early days, we met through connections with church and different things in the community. And he always presented himself as someone who was very organized mentally, very philosophical. And so when I heard later on that he actually had a PhD in philosophy, I'm like, yes, I'm not surprised. So who is Dr. Isaac Mwase?
Oh, you set me up, and you set the audience up. They're going to be expecting a whole lot from me, and I better bring down the expectations so that they don't get too disappointed. Who is Isaac Mwase? I am the third child born to Grace Mataka and MacDonald Paul Good News Mwase. I was born in Harare. Well, actually, I was born in Gweru. My birth certificate says Harare, but I was actually born at home in Gweru. And grew up in Zimbabwe, born and raised in Zimbabwe. And so who is Isaac Mwase could be answered in terms of parental lineage. My dad was originally from Malawi. He migrated to Zimbabwe as a result of wanting to advance his economic well-being. My mother was from a family that migrated to Zimbabwe from Mozambique. So that's the parental lineage. Who is Isaac Mwase? I could also answer it in terms of my current situation. I am the husband of Ruth N. Ziramasanga. Mwase, and to us, we were blessed to have one child, our daughter Rebecca and Chifuniro, and our daughter made us grandparents 4 years ago, and we are delighted that we have our grandchild living with us, and we are delighted that our daughter is in a relationship with a partner from Lebanon. And so you could define me in terms of those, in terms of my current family situation. You could also define me in terms of my current professional engagements. I am one of the pastors at University Baptist Church in Baltimore, Maryland. I serve alongside the Reverend Dr. Tom Harrington, who is the lead pastor. And I also serve alongside a husband and wife pastoral team, Josh and Alison Raskin. Each one of us have particular areas of responsibility. Who is Isaac Mwase? You could say also that I am somebody who came out of I started off professionally as a pastor in Zimbabwe, and then with some education ended up with a terminal degree and got into the professorate in 1994. And my adventures took me from Arkansas, Arkadelphia, Arkansas, to Montgomery, Alabama, and Tuskegee University, and eventually here to Maryland. And we've been living in Maryland now since 2008. So when you think about our the places that have defined who we are, Maryland has really made an imprint on us. We have now lived in Maryland longer than we lived in any of the places in the United States. So let me stop there as far as answering your question, who is Isaac Mwase, because I could go on and on and on, and there are other ways that I could define who I could answer the question, who is Isaac Mwase.
This is exciting. And you know what? You're right on the mark, because you are a theologian, you are an innovative leader, an educator, business management, you are into public health. And one of the things that I found fascinating about you is moving from Africa, doing your studies in North America, in the US, ending up being a professor. I mean, this is huge, because we know, can anything good come out of Nazareth, right? So when we think of Africa, when we hear of people moving, by God's design from this location to that, I mean, God has predestined where we will live, right? Even before we were born. I'm thinking, you mentioned your mom was from Mozambique and your dad was from Malawi, and here's a very, I was going to say international, but intercontinental family that ends up in Zimbabwe, and now here you are in the US. I mean, it's really fascinating. Could you just explain to our viewers and our listenership, just briefly, how did you find that transition from Africa to the US as an African? Just briefly. I know we could go on for a long time, but what are some of the highlights for you in terms of that transition from Africa to the US?
Yeah, so we came to the US in 1984, August of 1984. We almost decided not to come, because just prior to leaving Zimbabwe, let me back up a little bit. The time when we were contemplating coming to the United States, I was one of the pastors at Bulawayo Baptist Church. I was an associate pastor with Brian Anderson, and then things worked out. Doors opened for us to come to the U.S. And that's a story in itself. But we discovered in July just as we're getting ready to, as we're preparing to come to the US, that my wife was pregnant, that we we're going to be parents. And we almost decided not to come because the pastorate we're in was a very comfortable pastorate. The folk at Bulawayo Baptist Church took very good care of their pastors. We had a very nice house, big manse, and I had a car, gas was provided. Most of our groceries were provided. We had a bunch of farmers in the church, and they would provide us with meat, with fresh foods from farms. I mean, things were just nice. Yeah, I could have been in that pastorate for the rest of my life. And so to discover that we're pregnant, I said, go to another country with a pregnant wife. Why? Who would want to do that when you've got it so well? But in conversations with my father-in-law, the Reverend Ebons Ramasanga, he quickly impressed on us that God had opened the door, walk through it. Don't get worried about whether you are going to be able to make it in the U.S. with a baby on the way. And I always respected my father-in-law, and so we listened to his advice, and we boarded the plane and came to the U.S. How did we find the transition? It was jarring. It was a bit shocking because here we were coming from the city, the second largest city in Zimbabwe, and we're coming to Boiling Springs, North Carolina. That's the college town for Gardner-Webb College. Then it was Gardner-Webb College. It's now Gardner-Webb University. We flew into Charlotte, North Carolina, and the head boy, well, not the head boy, what do they call him? The student government president met us at the airport. He came with this Caprice Classic wagon, packed our bags, and down we come on I-85 toward Boiling Springs. And boy, our first experience of American highways scared the dickens out of me, because you had these huge trucks just whizzing by. I mean, we're gonna die, we're gonna die, we're gonna die. But Steve, who picked us at the airport, knew what he was doing, got us to the campus safely. Shock number one: our initial housing was this mobile home that had one room in the kitchen and a bed that you would bring down at night so that you'd go to sleep. During the day, you'd get it up. They call them what? Murphy beds. And you could have taken that whole space and put us in one of our rooms at the house where we were in. So, every day I was at the Dean of Student Affairs office begging to find us better accommodations than this. Sure, I was prepared to make the adjustment from being a big city pastor to being a student, but I didn't think that this was what I was going to. So that was the first shock. Eventually, they moved us into a duplex on Green Avenue, and you could take the 3 rooms in the duplex and fit them in our living room back in Zimbabwe. And that was a shock for us. Now, there were other shocks, but well, let me just mention one other shock. We were some of the very few students on campus who were Black. And so most of my classes, I would be the only Black in those classes. And that was quite interesting. Another major shock was, as time went on, we found ourselves being able to to fellowship with a variety of congregations, and deliberately we chose to be part of Pleasant Ridge Baptist Church in Boiling Springs, but we also established relationships with African American congregations from the get-go. The One of the workers in the admissions office, who's a dear lady, we still correspond right now, uh, connected us with her home church. And so we had this relationship with those churches. As time on, as churches in that area learned that I was an ordained Baptist minister, invitations began coming in. And one of the shocks that I had was that oftentimes I would go to preach at churches where I would be accepted because they viewed me as the product of the Baptist missionary enterprise in Zimbabwe, only to discover that whenever I would tell where I'd gone to preach to my African American fellow students, they would say, "Where did you go? What did you do? At what church?" The shock was that I was going into spaces where they, as African Americans born and raised here, would not be able to go. That was a shock.
Wow. This is this is fascinating, Dr. Mwase, because just listening to you, especially when you talked about the house you were living in Bulawayo, and then coming over to North Carolina and being at this college where you're put in a mobile home. And I'm thinking there could be people asking you if you were used to being in a developed environment like what they were offering you because they didn't know where you were coming from. And oftentimes, you get these experiences from people, and I'm saying to myself, I'm just hoping that these are the kinds of things you can capture in some book or something, and for history's sake, because other people would be fascinated. I mean, when we just the little you have shared now about your own journey, I mean, there's so much we could dwell on, and then the racial environment you're talking about as well. It's so real. I mean, North Carolina is I mean, it's right there in the south from where I am,
Yeah.
and I mean, this is fascinating, and thank you for sharing that. Yes, go ahead.
I'm actually going to do some memoirs that would tell my story of background and upbringing, my time in Zimbabwe up to the age of 24 when we left Zimbabwe. The memoirs will come out Lord willing, in a couple of years. I have a
Okay.
plan to reflect on how we've gone to be where we are now. The thing about the memoirs, which is going to be a tough challenge, is I'm attempting to do the memoirs in Shona initially.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
That's quite a challenge.
And Dr. Mpindu, I actually had the worst grade of all my grades for the O levels. One of my worst grades was Shona, but
I'm
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 going to.
I'm not surprised, Dr. Mwase, because even when you were younger and we would meet up, you seemed to have a good command of English, and I'm not surprised. But that grading system you're talking about, that sounds like someone I know, because I remember from grade 7, my lowest grade was in Shona, and all levels it was the same thing. So you and I You have a lot in common, and so that's going to be quite a challenge. I mean, it's going to be quite a publishing, and I think it's worth doing it. And obviously, you would have it translated into English. But
Yeah,
I mean, that's fascinating, Dr. Mwase. You and I could go on and on and on and on. Fast forward, we mentioned your involvement in the university as a professor. Could you explain briefly some of the challenges as an African within that environment when they discovered you are not um, uh, an African American, but you are African? And then you mentioned the phrase, you were the only black. Growing up in Africa, I didn't know I was black. I always referred to myself as African. I didn't know I was black until I came in this part of the world and where I'm told I am black. And I'm like, oh, really? I am. I guess I am.
yeah,
So
yeah,
how did you find that environment as professor? You know, you're teaching in an environment where people are hearing you, you know, lecturing and
yeah,
doing this in English.
yeah. Well, God is blessed us tremendously. I was fortunate to land my first professorship at a small liberal arts college in Arkansas, in Arkadelphia, Arkansas. I was on the faculty at Washita Baptist University, OBU, from 1994 up to 2004. Now, that professorship made history for several reasons. One, I was the first tenure track um, black at that school, and then I discovered as I was talking to the vice president for academic affairs, and he was almost in tears when he made me realize this, that yes, I was the first to integrate the faculty, uh, and what fascinated him was the fact that the school was also firstly integrated by another Zimbabwean, Mr. Makosholo. And I didn't know Mr. Makosholo personally, but Mr. Makosholo is known in Zimbabwe. He's a legend for having uh, been trained at Washita Baptist, went back to Zimbabwe, and was involved in education in the Sanyati area. Now, you would need to have my wife to talk about that aspect because at some point, it's part of my memoirs. At least I want to flesh out that aspect of the history, my history, as it connects to Mr. Makosho. Now, it was great to be at a small liberal arts college. I had wonderful colleagues who were right there to support me and to encourage me. And I enjoyed my 10 years on the faculty at Washita. And it was great to, here's a funny story. I'm black, black African. So my colleague in the philosophy department invited me to a basketball tournament. Faculty would play with students. And I guess the assumption was, he's this black guy, he knows something about basketball. It was terrible. And the good thing is my colleague knew, he thought I might be, but he said, nah, you need to go and do the sport that you're familiar with. So I ended up finding my way to the football field, to the soccer field. And there, managed to develop relations with students on the soccer field to the extent that the school then asked me to launch the soccer program at Washington Baptist University. So I recruited the first team, women's team that we launched. And then the second year, the school wanted to add the men's program, and I said, I can teach and do so. So we hired a soccer coach to do both programs, and I got back to my main responsibility in teaching. Um, I had fun teaching. It was great to do philosophy in that setting. Many times I felt like I was during the first few semesters. I was just 1 week ahead of the students. The preparations I had 3 preparations, and I did just about everything to just stay ahead of students. But established a nice rhythm, and we had a wonderful colleague in the philosophy department, Dr. Byron Eubanks, and uh, one of the things that happened when we moved to Philadelphia, we decided right off the bat that we were going to be members of an African American congregation. And so we joined Greater Pleasant Hill Baptist Church, and with the Reverend Ron Browning as pastor there. Soon after he died, and then a good friend of mine who was working also on the campus became pastor, Dr. Louis Shepherd. And it was great to develop these deep and meaningful relationships with the African American community in Arkadelphia. I have one colleague who we call each other on birthdays, and we kid each other. It was great.
Yeah. Dr. Mwase, like I said, I mean, there's so many things you and I could talk about. Today, our focus is really on Africans' contributions to global well-being. The month of February in North America, in both Canada and the US, is an opportunity to focus on the contributions of Black people. And when we think of the many inventions, say within North America, both Canada and the US, and even in England, contributions from Africans is just unbelievable. I mean, you think of Sarah Boone, who invented the ironing board, Thomas Jennings, dry cleaning, Alexander Miles, the elevator, Elijah McCoy, portable ironing board, Madame C.J. Walker, and often at 7 years of age, she came up with Black hair products. I mean, we could go on and on and on. The sewing machines, the refrigerator, central heating, home security. Patricia Bath, who did, the laser, the cataract treatment, and we could go on and on and on and on. When you think of contributions of Africa, of Africans to the global well-being, what are some things that stand out for you? I know I gave a few examples of things that were invented by Africans. And of course, recently we have this young man, Chikumbuto, who has invented a vehicle, only one of its kind, from Africa. It doesn't need fuel. It doesn't need electricity, as in plugging it into electricity. I mean, there's so many contributions. So share with us. Share with us in terms of these contributions. And of course, our viewers and listeners, those who just joined us, you are on Today's Africa with your host, Dr. FM. And we're delighted to have Dr. Isaac Mwase here, who is a theologian and innovative leader, a transformational leader, I must say, and someone who has had experience in different parts of the world. And we're delighted to have him today as we talk about Africans' contributions to the global well-being. Highlight some things that stand out, and then we will see where we go from there.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned quite a number of names that have made a great impact in various areas. I mean, you hardly can do modern life would not be made possible, but for some of the contributions of Black folk all over the world. You've mentioned some of them. When every time you drive and you come across a traffic light, that's an invention by a Black person. When it comes to our food supply, and food plays a very, very important role in well-being. I was at Tuskegee for 4 years, and if you look at the contributions made by faculty that school, you may have heard of George Washington Carver, a scientist who was based at Tuskegee University, did all kinds of phenomenal explorations around the peanut, the groundnut, the peanut, and came up with all kinds of applications from the peanut, including paint. It became a favorite of the Ford family because his inventions led to, the painting of vehicles. So there have been a lot of contributions by Blacks. It's unfortunate that we do not spend time to explore those contributions. But rather than just focusing on a particular segment, there is a tendency to say, okay, because we've got these inventors, therefore we are equal to everybody in the world. Even if we had not had produced people who made these contributions, the fact of the matter is you have had people who have made significant contributions, just as other, the Mayas, the Incas. If you look at inventors on the African continent historically, and you begin to reflect on the kind of science, the kind of mathematics, the kind of philosophy that was driving explorations that led to the construction of phenomenal structures, pyramids, the various walls that you see dotted all over the African continent, the ability to recognize what precious rocks are and what would lead to metals, all that showed that, God has given all of the peoples of the world the ability to be inquisitive and then to move from raw materials to goods that are usable for industry. And you're not going to win the argument with people who are already persuaded themselves that they're better than you. And so instead of spending time worrying about that, you focus on your own capabilities, and you stand on the shoulders of the George Washington Carvers, the Louis Adams, and the many others who have blazed the trail in a variety of fields.
You have touched on something very, very significant, and I really think it's worth highlighting again that because of these inventions, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's what gives us value and equity and equality on the world platform. No, we are equal before that and
Yeah,
after that. So
yeah,
even if there was no contribution,
yeah,
we are still part of this global village. And that is very, very profound because I think oftentimes I find, Dr. Mwase, that it's so easy for us as having been labeled black to try to live our life as a way of proving a point to somebody else. It's taxing. There's
yeah,
no need for that.
yeah, yeah.
We have to be comfortable with who we are and knowing
Doc,
that we are making contributions. Some of the contributions you made, Dr. Marcy, they will never hit the headlines. None of those students will come back to Africa and actually say, you know, we had this professor, Dr. Isaac Mwase, who changed my life, who impacted my life. We may never hear those stories,
yeah,
but that's not the reason why we do it.
yeah,
So your point is valid. The other thing I wanted to mention, Dr. Mwase, is I discovered that in the Ukraine, the largest church with over 100,000 members was actually run or led by a Nigerian pastor. He has since left after the war. And you, as a pastor and someone connected within the community and serving in the community as clergy, you would know the implications of establishing something that big. It's not easy. And
yeah,
yet, here is an African brother who has contributed to uh, the global well-being. He had a soup kitchen that provided children from the streets to come and be fed. They had over 2,000 children who were trained, equipped. He lived with some of them, and they would take them back to their families. Now,
mm,
that's huge.
yeah,
So I really like the fact that you said, no, even if there were no inventions, we are in this global village together.
yeah,
And that is a very good point. We're so glad you mentioned that. It is
yeah,
important.
yeah. Dr. Mpindu, the tragedy is that the race science that comes out of 17th, 18th century really messed up everybody because you know the hierarchy that was established with white people at the top and then so on, going down all the way to blacks at the bottom. It's messed up everybody. And so it's part of the reason why you've got racism around the globe. If you are if you are black and darker, whether in Australia or in China or in South America or in India, you tend to be, you viewed, people tend to see you as backward, is not developed. And people constantly are proving that that's not true. I mean, in all those places, you have people who rise despite the challenges, despite the prejudices, and they distinguish themselves in various areas. And the good thing about the church is the church does have a it does have a teaching. Um, uh, Glad it's being embraced by more people, even though some try to hierarchy, to create this hierarchy of peoples. But for the most part, there is a recognition that all of us are God's children, created in God's image, with capacities to do phenomenal things. And I've been fortunate that uh, our our pathways have led us to a place where we can make not only contributions to the well-being of the church, but society, locally, in the state where we live here in Maryland, nationally in the United States, and globally. For the 4 years I was at Tuskegee, I was at the National Center for Bioethics in Research and Healthcare. That travels
Actually,
around.
actually, you know what, Dr. Mwase, I'm sorry for interrupting because I want to get to that just in a little while. But
Sure.
I would like to recognize our brother James Nyatoro, who is listening and watching all the way from the UK. And so we're delighted that we do have people from around the world who are part of this. And of course, like I said, we are live in over 140 different countries around the world. And so we're delighted that you have joined us. And of course, this is today's Africa with your host, Dr. FM, Francis Mpindu Munangi. And we have a special guest, Dr. Isaac Mwase, who is uh, um, a transformational leader, someone who is not only interested or participated in the academia, but someone who serves the community as an African. And what an opportunity to talk about this as we talk about Africans' contributions to global well-being. And we're talking global well-being. We have opportunities, like you said, that have come to us, that have been opened to us to live outside of the continent, in the continent, and pretty much globally. It is estimated that there are over 200 million Africans in the diaspora, and that's a lot of bodies. Someone said that if you go to any country and you don't find a Nigerian, make sure you leave that country as soon as possible. I thought that was a very interesting way. I mean,
Yeah.
our brothers and sisters in Nigeria, I mean, they are the largest by population, so they
Yeah.
are all over. But not only them, I mean,
And
there's so
making
many of
wonderful
us
contributions
making wonderful contributions. You're
wherever they
absolutely
are.
right.
Yeah.
Absolutely right. And so we have, people who are now living outside voluntarily, and we also have those, unfortunately, who have had to go into forced immigration because of circumstances in some of our African countries. But you're absolutely right. So, what are some of those opportunities that have opened up for you in terms of global, national influence or impact?
Well, I started talking about my time at Tuskegee University at the National Center for Bioethics in Research and Healthcare. There, initially, the concern was to make sure that the research enterprise here in the United States and around the world would be conducted in a way that did not uh, d- that did not bring harm to vulnerable populations. Uh, and we were seeking to transform the legacy of the United States Public Health Service study of syphilis, which pretty much used the African American populations in Alabama, and so that was what we're seeking to transform. So there were those contributions, but much more recently, I became part of the clergy staff at University Baptist Church 6, 7 years ago, and during this time, I've managed to become involved with the Cooperative Baptist Fellowship, which is the denominational body that we partner with, and this year, I've had the joint privilege of serving as the chair of the Global Missions Council, and our responsibility is to work with the staff that works with my missionary, who work with missionaries. We call them field personnel, who are serving all over the world. And there were close to 50, and uh, when I started as chair of the Global Missions Council, and then that number is dropping some as a result of having to deal with some of the challenges of our times, and then I've also had the joy and privilege of serving with the Baptist World Alliance, and this is the global body that brings together in solidarity and cooperation Baptist bodies from all over the world. I serve on the Commission for Interfaith Relations, and I also serve on the Resolutions Committee. And so you can imagine on the interfaith relations, we are seeking to monitor what's happening in the relationship between faith communities, particularly when the relations go south. There are some places where you have tensions between Muslims and Christians. We seek to speak to those issues and to find ways of intervening in order to bring about peace among people of different faiths. With the resolutions committee, our task is to monitor what's going on around the world and then to speak to issues in a timely fashion. Basically, people will draft resolutions or will commission resolutions to be drafted, and the committee is the one that's responsible in doing the editing that takes into consideration all kinds of, and you are balancing commitments and perspectives so that you come up with a position that ensures global well-being. So it's been a joy serving in those capacities. In fact, this coming July, I'll be traveling to Brisbane for the Baptist World Alliance meetings as part of the work that I do on the commission and on the resolutions committee.
That is very, very encouraging to see how the Baptist as an organization are involved in these efforts to bring peace. You talked about the interfaith. I can imagine, because there are times when there are tensions within religions, especially the bigger religions. Christianity, if I might call Christianity a religion. Someone said that there's a difference between a religion and something else. I said religion is man-made, but when we think of Christianity, it wasn't started by us. It's foreign to every culture because it was something that God revealed to us. That's the way I look at it. And obviously, we're not here to debate which one is better. People have to look for themselves, look into facts for themselves. Someone said, we're all brainwashed. You just have to decide what you're going to wash your brains with. Some of us have decided, you know what? God created the world, and that's a starting point for us. And of course, others can choose something else. But it's really encouraging to see how the Baptists are engaging in these interfaith opportunities, seeking harmony and resolutions. Now, what would be some of the challenges that would be found in those circles as these efforts to bring peace would be realized?
I was in Nigeria for the last meeting of the Baptist World Alliance. It was held in Lagos, and one of the challenges that came up is in places where you have fundamentalist religion, and that tends to say we are right, everybody else is wrong, and we're not going to have space for anybody, to the point of actually coercing people or doing violence to people because they are of a different faith. You have that challenge, and it's one of the reasons why we drafted a resolution against religious nationalism, because the religious nationalism tends to do violence to those who may be of a different religion or may not want to have any religion whatsoever. And so one of the reasons why I remained a Baptist is because we really argue vigorously that people need to be allowed the freedom to believe what they want to believe. And so you need to create societal structures that allow people to choose how they want to define themselves spiritually. And that's not always a position that is embraced. Here in the United States, you have a lot of folk who are wanting to say, who are saying this is a Christian nation. And if you go into some other places, this is a Muslim country. And so we're saying if somebody wants to be something else, allow them to be. It's a human right to be able to choose the faith that you want.
That is profound. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. Unfortunately, like you said, when people of a certain disposition, like someone said, within philosophy, some people say that my mind is made up. Don't confuse me with the facts. you know,
but then my comeback would, you need to be able to examine what you believe.
That's
And
right.
be able to defend it, and you should be able to allow others to the same privilege.
Exactly.
So critical thinking is important.
Exactly. And within that, for you to be able to have healthy dialogues, you have to be human. You have to be personable. You have to invite someone into an environment where you are having a conversation. Otherwise, it becomes a shouting match, and nobody's listening, and you're wasting your time. So I agree with you totally that it is important to analyze what you believe. And I think that's the same thing for us as Africans. As we think about our contributions to this global well-being, it's important that we be self-analytical, that we examine ourselves. Like I said earlier, not to live our lives as a response or to make a point to other people, but to say, this is who I am, and I am going to serve from my understanding of who I am in relation to the God who created me and gave me this life.
Yeah.
And I think that's something. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, and there's one major project that's coming down the horizon that's going to dawn, and it's going to emerge out of these relationships that we are establishing within the context of the Baptist World Alliance and then the All Africa Baptist Fellowship. One of the things that I've really admired in terms of contribution, continental uplift for Africa, is what the Methodists have done with African University, where they are training leaders for church and society in one place. And they are coming from all over different African countries to Zimbabwe and getting their training. Want to take the same idea, and I made this case to the All Africa Baptist Men's Fellowship when I went to Cameroon several years ago, saying, can you imagine a Pan-African Baptist University that would be established in a way that would train leaders for church and society with the entrepreneurial orientation, with the producer mentality? Because part of the problem on the continent is that we tend to be consumers rather than producers. Can you imagine a university that is distributed, where you are going to have students from the get-go learning how do we build ships that sail from deep ports on the African continent? How do we build, you mentioned the young men in Zimbabwe who has come up with these vehicles. How do we come up with products that move from raw materials to finished products on the continent, rather than waiting for locomotives to be built in Germany or Japan or the US? That's one of the uh, dreams I have. And as a legacy project, I'm praying that we'll be able to lay the groundwork for the emergence of a Pan-African Baptist University with the that harnesses all of the people who have percolated to the top, the 200 million that are spread all over the world. Among those, you have Baptists who have risen to the highest levels and say, okay, let's see how we can get such a university off the ground.
Thank you for mentioning that. Now, Dr. Mwase, I just wanted to be clear on this. So when you think of this Pan-African university, and I know that it's coming out of the Baptist environment, are you then saying that you are recruiting only Baptists, or you're saying it's a Baptist college that is open to everyone who happens to be part of
Indeed.
one? Okay.
Yeah, it's much easier to build something from structures that exist. And because you already have the All Africa Baptist Fellowship, it's much easier to be able to pull human resources that can really go into overdrive in standing up this kind of a university. But you are doing it in a way that does not exclude. And that's one of the things that not only Baptists, but other denominations know very well, that you start something, but you open it up to everybody.
I see your point, because I think in doing that, it makes it easier to have someone as the contact or being the sponsors, people who came up with the vision, so that it's not just, for example, if you were to come up with an ecumenical kind of an environment, it's kind of hard to raise funds and have people to be there. But if you say, listen, this is who we are, we want to establish this, but we are opening it up to whosoever will want to be part of the team, it makes it much, much easier.
Yeah.
This is great. Well, this is today's Africa. We are on Love Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio, and we're delighted to have Dr. Isaac Mwase here, who has been enlightening us on this topic on Africans' contributions to the global well-being. And he has highlighted quite a number of things in terms of a personal level, and then denominational or organizational level. And we have also highlighted quite a number of things in terms of Africans' contribution. And one of the things I discovered just as I was preparing for today was that the mobile money, actually came from Africa. This whole idea of depositing and transferring and withdrawing without a bank account is something that Africans have created.
Lovely.
And I mean, I'm not too sure that it had actually dawned on me that this was our contributions to the world. I mean, you think of how many people have bank accounts in Africa. Not many. And yet we have come up, and I'm saying we with pride here, we have come up with a way of doing all these deposits and transactions and sending money and purchasing things with no bank accounts, which then makes it clear that the Western approach of doing things needed to be tweaked in order to cater to more people, or the most common people, because they don't function like that.
Yeah.
So I was just fascinated by that, and just to think that this is a contribution. I mean, you go to Africa, I was actually surprised how many times you find people with maybe 2 or 3 cell phones, or this one, the battery just died, they'll switch and they'll pull out the SIM card and put it in another, and they continue business. And I'm like, wow, this is creativity.
Yeah.
So it is really fascinating to see all that. And of course, we think of You had mentioned mathematics. You've mentioned the modern art, coffee. Shea butter. I was like, oh, really? I thought this was something that came from. I mean, I know a lot of our African women use shea butter a lot,
Yeah,
but you see all that and you're like, all
I'm
these.
shining because I use shea butter.
There you go. So
Yeah,
it's really encouraging to see that to those who want to really observe and put into account the contributions of people in this global village. We are all created equal, and
yeah,
we do not all have the same skills, but some of us are more gifted than others. I mean, you think of these young men, Maxwell Chukwumbuzo, we just talked about him, the microsonic energy powered car. I mean, whoever thought of it? And I'm told that he's someone who actually dropped out of high school
yeah.
because of financial difficulties. And now think of how much money he is going to be making from what he has. I'm told that the car is going to sell maybe around 14,000 US, and that's way less than what other brand new cars have been costing over the years. And
Uh,
so this is going to change a lot of things in the world. And so again, when we think of Africans' contributions to the global well-being, and I'm glad we're talking about well-being and not necessarily just global village, because well-being, we're talking about not just survival, but living life as
mm,
God has created us and given us opportunity to live. The well-being. I mean, you as a pastor, it's not just the spiritual aspects, but there are also other aspects in terms of counseling and mental health and emotional health and physical. You mentioned earlier that you were not available because you were doing your yoga, and I'm thinking, oh, okay, so this guy is not just into this, but that and that, because it's about our well-being,
yeah,
and I think
I,
it's
I, I,
important
I,
for
I,
us to focus on that.
yeah, I ran 5 miles and then did a little bit of yoga. It's good to make sure that you have work-life balance, that you experience a, a, a decent degree of well-being yourself, as you seek to address the well-being of others. And some other day we'll talk about some of the things we're doing locally to ensure well-being in Baltimore and in Maryland, and how that scales up to well-being nationally. I just came back from a border trip to South Texas, in to see firsthand what's happening in light of the rapidly changing policies in the United States. And we're living in challenging times, and challenging times should bring out the best out of us. And we had a chance to talk to Sister Norma of Catholic Charities in the Rio Grande Valley, and I asked her, how do you keep from being angry and getting chewed up when you are seeing sometimes decisions being made by powerful people in ways that do harm to whole segments of God's children? He said, I double down and focus on the positive and keep on working
Mhm.
on the positive. What is it that I need to do to change the fate for this one and that group and that group? And that's what we have to do.
Dr. Mwase, you're absolutely right. Listen, we have to bring you back because those things you talked about, they are worth touching on. For us to actually hear that here you are as an African making contribution in another part of the world and now connecting with people coming from the southern part of the United States, and you as an African are part of all this, bringing wellness, or seeking to bring wellness in that type of environment. It is very, very encouraging. I mean, you are the kind of people who make us as Africans really proud to know that we have brothers and sisters who have been placed by God in these positions of honor and service because you have a heart. I think it was Dr. Kwame Nkrumah who said, I am African not because I was born in Africa, but because Africa was born in me. And I think it doesn't matter where we go. I know that when you did your PhD, I think you looked at Mugambi and all that with his philosophies.
Yeah.
Now, that's being African. We're looking at what is our thinking? What are we contributing? How are we doing it? And so I just want you to know that we will have you back. We will bring you back. That's not a threat. It's a promise. We'll definitely have other areas to focus on as well, because as we have seen that you are a man with many experiences and many talents as well. I mean, you were part of this bioethics and all that. So it'll be very, very important, because the topic you touched on, health, is very, very important. And we know that there was a whole time in the United States where African Americans were used as guinea pigs. And that's something we could even touch on in terms of wellness. What is happening to bring mental, emotional, social, physical wellness in those types of environments? And so we will definitely have you back. And of course, to our viewers, thank you for being with us today. I'm looking at our time and I realize, oh my goodness, time has flown by. You know, I know we kind of started slow looking at some of the things that you had done before, but I think this was worth looking into, especially as we celebrate the contributions of Africans, not just Africans as descendants of Africans, but Africans in Africa as well and in the diaspora. And we're really, really delighted that you have been here with us on today's Africa on Afrobeat Music Talk Radio, Love Bay Afrobeat Music Talk Radio. And this is your host, Dr. FM, and we're delighted that you've been with us. Dr. Mwase, before we let you go, as we think of our topic today, I'd like to give you 1 minute to wrap up in terms of what would you like us to go away reflecting on as we think about Africans' contributions to global well-being.
Wherever you are, do what you can to improve life for those that are around you, and know that you need to keep on adding skills in your ability to make a contribution where you are. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mwase. What a way to end on. Let's continue to improve the lives of others. But we can only improve the life of others, according to you, when we add skills into our own lives so that we know how to do it effectively. What a wonderful place to end on. So again, thank you, sir. We really appreciate you making the time to be with us today. And we will be in touch and we will have you back. So again, to our viewers, thank you for being with us today on Love Bay Afro Music Talk Radio, the #1 African and Caribbean music radio on the planet. And I really mean that. We are live and active 24/7. And there are quite a variety of programs every day and every hour, 24/7, like I said. So please tune in and share this with others as well. We are in the process of rebranding, regrouping, and firing ourselves up so that we become more effective. So if you have ideas and things that you would like us to be aware of, or you might even have some guests you would like us to bring into some of our programs, please feel free to send us an email, and we would be more than happy to put that into consideration. And again, thank you for joining us today. This is your host, Dr. FM, signing off. We'll see you next week for another time with Today's Africa.